For all that celebrations are magnificent, at the heart of the pageantry is a simple message: service.
Nobody saw this coming. Right in front of King Charles, Camilla, Princess Anne, and the whole inner circle, Prince William pulled off a move that left everyone dead silent. He walked right up to Kate, carrying this historic crown, something tied deep to his mom Diana's personal wishes. Then, without asking a single soul for permission, he held it up and made it official. Diana's final wish was finally happening. Before we dive into what this whole fallout means for the royals, hit that subscribe button real quick so you do not miss a thing. The closed doors of Windsor Castle promised privacy, but definitely not peace. The senior royals had been called in thinking William was just going to give a routine update on Kate's future role. But the moment they saw what he was holding, the whole vibe changed. This was not the official state crown you see at massive public ceremonies. This was a private family piece, kept right alongside Diana's personal things and the dreams she had for William's future wife. William did not hesitate for a second. Right in front of everyone, he placed the crown on Kate's head and made it loud and clear. Within their inner circle, Kate was being recognized as the exact woman Diana always wanted by his side. He said it with a quiet intensity that completely took Kate's breath away. She did not feel like she had won some game. She just felt the heavy weight of a blessing from a mother-in-law she never got to meet, a woman whose love was still shaping the man standing next to her. Charles looked down, gripping his chair tightly. He realized his son had done something way bigger than just honor his wife. William had just turned Diana's legacy into an active, undeniable force inside the royal family, and Charles could neither brush it off nor control the damage. Anne watched closely as the king tried and failed to hide the regret written all over his face. Camilla stayed completely silent, but her face dropped when William pulled out a folded piece of paper. According to a letter preserved with the crown, Diana wrote that William's future wife needed courage, real empathy, loyalty, and the strength to protect him from the icy isolation of royal life. That was the exact moment Camilla realized a few people in that room had known about this letter for years. Kate touched the edge of the crown like she was afraid the whole thing might vanish. Then William looked his dad dead in the eye and said he was going to read his mother's full letter out loud, and warned that one part was directly about Charles and the choices he made after their marriage fell apart. As William unfolded that last page, the room went from a tribute to Kate into a full-on reckoning with a woman the palace never managed to silence. For William, this was never just about putting a crown on his wife's head. It was about bringing together the two women who shaped his entire life through an impossible loss. The mother who protected his childhood, and the wife who guided his adulthood. Right there, in front of a family still torn apart by Diana's ghost, he asked Kate to carry both the love and the history forward. William held that folded letter close as the room went dead silent. Being the future king had taught him to hide his pain, keep his cool, and always put duty over feelings. But being Diana's son taught him something completely different, that love without real honesty is just a prison. Kate understood that struggle inside out. She walked into royal life knowing every smile, every silent moment, and every tough decision would be compared to the icon who came before her. William remembered one specific conversation from his childhood better than anything else. Diana had sat him down after a heavy family fight and warned him never to let the title make him cold or distant toward the people he loved. When she talked about the crown, she was not just talking about power, she meant the crushing pressure, the emotional walls, and the icy control that came with it. William carried those words with him for years, especially whenever public duty threatened to pull his own marriage apart. Kate turned to him and spoke softly. She had zero interest in replacing his mother, and she definitely did not want to inherit the pain that haunted Diana during her time in the palace. William answered without missing a beat. Honoring his mom was not about turning his wife into another broken princess. It was about stopping the cycle before history repeated itself. Kate looked at him again, the anxiety on her face melting into a heavy, deep understanding. William then revealed through the written note that he had kept a copy of Diana's wish locked away in a drawer at Kensington Palace, opening it only when the pressure from advisors, public duty, or constant judgment started weighing too hard on his marriage. Anne was the first to react. Recognizing several of the phrases, she admitted that Diana had actually brought this up to her in private once, describing the exact kind of woman her eldest son would need. Someone strong enough to ground him, but bold enough to call him out when it mattered. Charles slowly reached for the page after that final sentence was read, but William folded it up before his dad could even touch it. The move was completely calm, but the line was drawn clear as day. The king pulled his hand back, regret written all over his face. That was when Sophie noticed Camilla whispering urgently to a senior palace aide by the door. The aide took one look at the queen consort, and within seconds, a quiet question started spreading around the room. Did this ceremonial crown actually have any real legal backing? The family had barely processed Diana's words before the first pushback hit, not directed at the late princess, but targeted straight at the woman wearing her blessing. The road to that crazy moment did not start at Windsor. It began years earlier at Althorp, behind the closed doors of a private library, where William faced the one side of Diana's legacy the palace could never control. Surrounded by old family records and memories untouched by royal rules, he was handed a sealed envelope in his mom's own handwriting, along with a simple rule: open it only when you truly know who you can trust. William always knew that parts of his mother's private life were completely off-limits to the palace. After she passed, her personal belongings were split up among family guardians, legal trustees, and private archives set up to protect sensitive records. While some letters ended up in the royal archives, others stayed right with the Spencer family, where no palace official could ever rewrite what they meant. The prince wanted those things close to him. But every new page he found threatened to drag up the pain he had spent years trying to bury. The real turning point happened during a private memorial at Althorp. William watched Kate step away from a conversation just to comfort a upset young guest who started crying the second Diana's name came up. She did not ask for anything, did not try to draw attention to herself, and just stayed right there until the child calmed down. Diana's brother saw the whole thing. In a written account from that night, he later told William that his sister had once described that exact kind of natural, effortless empathy. William got the sealed envelope right before leaving the library. He opened it alone that night, and just broke down the second he saw his mom's handwriting. Diana had written that her eldest son would one day need a wife who could protect his heart without letting royal life turn it to stone. The future king read that line over and over again. It did not feel like a prediction so much as a mother reaching through time to stop him from shutting down emotionally. Kate broke into tears when he finally showed her the letter. To her, it did not sound like praise, it felt like a massive responsibility. Diana's hopes put a serious weight on her shoulders, and she admitted she was terrified of letting down both the woman who wrote those words and the man who had been carrying them for so long. William reassured her that she had already proven herself simply by keeping him grounded and human whenever duty demanded complete silence. Then came a second note that changed the whole game. It mentioned a ceremonial family crown and gave clear instructions. It was only to be given when William was ready to openly choose love over palace paranoia. An attached document traced the piece right back to a private Spencer collection, confirming Diana wanted it handed down to her son. That was when the real trouble hit. William found out through an internal palace memo that officials were planning to clip Kate's wings, stripping away her independent authority and forcing her to get approval before making any major moves. The warning in Diana's letter was not just some ghost from the past anymore. What started as a private promise at Althorp turned into straight-up defiance the second William realized Kate was getting dragged into the exact same machine that tore his mother apart. The silence finally snapped when Charles stood up from his chair and told his son point-blank that no crown, symbolic or not, gets handed out inside a royal residence without the king's explicit say-so. William did not flinch. Kate stayed seated right between them, still wearing Diana's gift, while father and son went toe-to-toe across decades of built-up grief, resentment, and raw tension. Charles did not just see a sweet family tribute, he saw a direct threat to the royal order. The prince had brought out a massive symbol without running it by the king or the high-level legal advisors who coached the crown. William shut that argument down instantly. This was not a constitutional coronation. the official ceremony that hands over actual royal authority. It was a private family matter, and as far as he was concerned, no king on earth had the moral right to silence a mother's last wish for her son. The king stepped in closer, warning William that Diana's memory could not be weaponized to override a reigning monarch. But William fired right back with an intensity that blew everyone away. He said her pain started in the first place because too many people put the institution over human beings and blind obedience over real love. Charles flinched hard, but William did not back down for a second. He had watched every private request concerning Kate disappear straight into palace bureaucracy, buried under endless delays, committees, and polite diplomatic language until nothing ever got done. Before either of them could say another word, Kate stood up. She took off the crown and set it down carefully on the table between father and son, her voice super steady despite the heavy emotion behind every word. She made it crystal clear that she was not going to be used as a pawn in their unresolved family feud. Turning right to William, she made him hear her out. Honoring Diana could not mean dragging people through that same kind of cruelty all over again under a different excuse. Anne broke the awkward silence that followed, pointing out a recorded family conversation saved right after the whole thing went down. She confirmed that Diana had actually talked to her in private about William's future wife, confessing how terrified she was that the poor girl would end up controlled, isolated, and scapegoated every time the royal machine felt threatened. Charles stared at his sister, but Anne did not budge an inch. Her warning came straight from cold, hard experience. Charles reached out and picked up the crown real slow, but as he turned it over and looked at the inside rim, he pulled back in total shock. Diana's initials were carved right into the metal. That mark proved this was no cheap stunt. It was something planned out with total purpose, long before Kate ever stepped into the picture. Camilla leaned in close to the king, telling him in a low, sharp whisper to shut the whole thing down right then and there. She warned him that letting this fly would permanently wreck his authority. Charles looked from his wife to his son, then back down at those engraved initials even though he was holding the crown. The real power was in a decision he could no longer dodge. He had spent his entire life learning how to protect the crown, but nothing in his training had prepared him to fight against his own son's grief. With Camilla pushing hard to call off the whole show and William refusing to back off his mom's last request, the king was backed into a total dead end. That was when Princess Anne stepped up, shut the doors herself, and made it dead clear that nobody was walking out of that room until the family finally faced the truth. Charles knew that his word carried massive weight. As king, his decision would make or break the moment, determining whether William's move got brushed off as some private stunt or recognized as a historic turning point. One word from him could save the whole thing. One signature could wipe it off the books completely. Anne refused to let royal rules hide what everyone was feeling. Even though she had spent her life standing up for discipline and duty, she was not going to defend the institution by pretending the elephant in the room was not there. She told her brother straight up that William was not acting out of some power grab, but out of absolute fear that Kate would be left out in the cold to handle the crushing pressure all by herself, exactly like Diana was. Charles looked at his son and finally faced the reality he had been running from for years. Hearing Diana's words come straight out of William's mouth dragged him right back to every single red flag he ignored during their marriage. The king admitted he had confused putting up with pain for actual strength, and dead silence for peace. William just listened without cutting in, his face totally unreadable. Apologies were nice, but they could not rewrite history or undo the damage. Then Anne pulled an old handwritten note out of a private folder, kept hidden away in her personal papers. Diana had written that William's future wife had to be defended out in the open by him, especially when the heat was coming from inside the family. Anne laid the note right in front of Charles, who knew that handwriting the second he saw it. That piece of paper turned his son's rebellion into something way too real to ignore. Just then, a top advisor walked in with a heavy update. Photos of the whole thing had already been shot for the private royal archives, where all major family moments get logged. Even if they tried to declare the whole thing null and void, the image of Kate wearing Diana's crown was officially locked in history and could never be erased. Charles set his pen down right beside the official document. Kate watched his hand stay completely still and gently asked him if protecting the crown always had to come at the cost of somebody else's pain. That question hit harder than any direct attack ever could. Camilla stood there waiting for him to sign, but the pen never moved. Instead, the king looked at William and asked his son to step outside for a private talk. The queen consort realized right then and there that the control she thought she had was completely slipping through her fingers. As father and son disappeared behind the library doors, one thing was crystal clear. Their relationship, and honestly the entire family dynamic, was never going to be the same. Even though the whole moment lasted just a few minutes, the shockwaves hit every corner of the palace before Charles and William even finished talking. Staff were getting totally conflicting orders. Advisors were panicking over how to spin the story, and among the family members, every single quiet moment felt like a massive loyalty test. Kate, still taking in the weight of what just happened, was suddenly thrown right into the middle of a war she never wanted to start. The whole household picked sides instantly. One side thought William just saved the royal family by bringing some real, raw emotion into a system frozen by rigid old rules. The other side saw it as a straight-up power grab, arguing that a future king has no business setting up a symbol that powerful without the reigning king's green light. On top of that, the bar for Kate just got raised to a crazy level. The public would now expect her to be as compassionate as Diana, while the palace was terrified she might pick up her rebellious spirit. Camilla headed back to her private sitting room, took off her gloves real slow, and asked a close aide straight up if the family now saw her as the bad guy standing between Diana's legacy and Kate's future. She tried her best to play it cool, but her voice gave away how bad it hurt. After spending decades fighting to secure her spot next to Charles, this one move left her feeling completely sidelined all over again. Meanwhile, Kate opened up to Sophie, admitting that the guilt was really starting to eat away at her. She never asked for the crown. She never asked William to go to war with his dad, and it killed her to be the reason another huge rift was opening up in the family. Sophie heard her out before dropping a huge detail. William's original plan was to do a super quiet, low-key presentation with just the two of them and the kids. Sophie explained what flipped the switch for him. William had stumbled across an internal palace proposal set up to strip away Kate's future authority, making it so she had to get high-level approval before making any independent moves. To William, that was solid proof that his mom's warnings were happening all over again in real time, and he realized keeping quiet would only let the problem get worse. Anne later caught wind of another detail. Members of Camilla's team had been directly involved in passing that proposal around. Whether the queen consort actually signed off on it herself was still up in the air. But the connection sent suspicion through the roof. Stepping out into the hallway, Kate stopped right in front of the open display case holding the crown. She did not reach out to touch it. Instead, she just shut the lid and broke down crying right as William walked up. He told her that Charles had offered a deal, but the catch was brutal. Diana's name had to be scrubbed from the whole ceremony completely. For Kate, the question was not even about wearing the crown anymore. It was whether honoring Diana was actually worth tearing open the exact same wounds her husband had spent his whole life trying to fix. Away from all the advisors, the titles, and the royal BS, William and Kate were finally left alone, staring at each other with that closed display case sitting right between them. William expected her to fight for the ceremony, but instead, Kate hit him with the one question nobody else had the guts to ask. Was he actually doing this to honor his mother's last wish? Or was he just using it to fight an old, unresolved war with his dad? Kate got the terms of Charles's deal clear as day. The whole crown thing would be recognized as a quiet family moment, but any official mention of Diana's written letter would be completely wiped from the record. Sure, that middle ground might keep the peace and stop it from looking like a direct slap in the face to the king, but it would also erase the exact truth that pushed William to act in the first place, shrinking his mom's legacy down to a secret nobody was allowed to talk about out loud. Kate looked right at her husband and flat out refused to wear a crown born out of pure anger, no matter how justified that anger was. She saw his pain but stood her ground. This moment had to be about real healing, not payback. William tried to argue back, but stopped himself mid-sentence. Her words hit him right where all his duty, grief, and pride usually put up walls. He finally admitted the ugly truth out loud. A part of him actually wanted Charles to stand in front of the whole family and feel the exact same powerlessness Diana felt when her voice was tossed aside. He wanted his dad to know what it felt like to be completely stripped of control in a room full of authority. Kate listened without a hint of judgment, but held her line. Playing out old revenge fantasies was not going to fix a thing. Then she dropped a bombshell of her own months ago. Someone had shown her Diana's letter in complete confidence, and she had chosen to keep quiet about it. She felt William needed to figure out on his own what kind of son and future king he wanted to be, because if she had nudged him in any direction, the decision would not have been truly his. Then Kate laid down her own non-negotiable rule. She would only put that crown back on if Charles himself personally handed it to William and explicitly called out Diana's role in shaping the future of the monarchy. No hiding it, no watering it down, and no stripping away the name of the woman who inspired the whole thing. William sat down next to her, leaned his head against her hand, and told her she had just fulfilled his mom's wish, not by grabbing for power, but by stopping his grief from running his life. She held his hand tight, and together they walked back into the family room. Neither of them had any idea if Charles would swallow that deal or scrap the whole event entirely. In the end, the final call was not going to come down to royal protocol or old traditions. It was going to come down to a father deciding how to face the memory of the woman he once failed. By morning, that private gathering was not a secret anymore. A photo had leaked straight out of the palace archives. Kate sitting right under the Windsor crest, William standing by her side, the Spencer crown sitting right between them, and Charles watching from a few feet back. Even without an official caption, the whole world instantly got the picture. Diana's legacy was officially back at the absolute center of the royal story. The palace scrambled to drop a quick, carefully worded statement, calling the whole thing a private family tribute with no constitutional weight, meaning zero impact on titles, the line of succession, or actual royal authority. But that cold, formal PR language only made the photo hit 10 times harder. News outlets and commentators saw right through it. This was not about legal loopholes. It was about memory, loyalty, and a son publicly putting his mother back in her rightful place in history. William felt totally exposed the second the picture hit the press. He was terrified Kate would get ripped apart for being a clout chaser when she never wanted any of it, and he blamed himself for dragging her straight into another public shitstorm. He swore he would come out and defend her publicly. But Kate cut him off and reminded him that playing silent was not an option anymore. The public had already seen the truth with their own eyes. Charles watched the news coverage all by himself. One TV pundit pointed out that this ceremony was the exact moment William reclaimed Diana's place in the royal narrative, and that line hit the king like a ton of bricks. He had spent decades trying to walk the tightrope between official duty and personal memory. But his son had just done in 5 minutes what the palace had spent 30 years dodging, owning up to her massive influence without holding anything back. When news broadcasts zoomed in on the crown, Diana's carved initials popped up clear as day on screen, proving to the entire world that this was no last-minute temper tantrum. It was a calculated, long-planned move. That single detail completely flipped the story nationwide. This was not some sudden royal rebellion, but a son finally keeping a promise he had made years ago. The palace tracked down the source of the leak pretty fast. An elderly archives official came clean during an internal interview, admitting he leaked the photo because keeping it hidden would just repeat the royal family's old mistake of trying to cover up Diana's legacy. He knew he was going to get fired, but he flat out refused to apologize. Out in front of Kensington Palace, massive crowds started gathering at the gates holding white roses. One woman held up a sign that said, "Her son remembered." By that evening, the photo was broadcast across every TV screen nationwide, turning the tide of public opinion almost overnight. With public sympathy blowing up everywhere, the palace had zero room to maneuver. Charles announced he was going to give a speech to both the family and the nation from Windsor before Kate made her final call. The public had already passed its verdict, But the real outcome still came down to the man standing right between Diana's ghost and her son. When the family gathered again, every single advisor was kicked out of the room. Charles walked in carrying the ceremonial crown himself. William stood right by Kate, with no idea if his dad was about to shut the whole thing down or finish what they started. The king said Diana's name without a second of hesitation, owning up for the first time ever that her ultimate wish was never a threat to the crown, but a lesson on how to keep the family human. He officially signed off on the moment as a major family event that honored Kate's role by William's side, keeping it totally separate from any official, legal coronation down the road. While a real official coronation seals a monarch's legal power, this private act meant something entirely different, something built on raw, personal truth instead of state authority. Charles made it crystal clear that Diana's wish was never about titles, power, or clout. She just wanted her son to be loved for real, challenged when he needed it, and protected from the brutal isolation of royal life. Facing his family, the king admitted what pride had hidden for decades. He had once mistaken silence for stability and control for protection. William's move had forced him to face the true cost of those mistakes, especially when the people closest to the crown were expected to just suffer in silence. He did not offer a single excuse, choosing instead to finally stop defending the past. William responded with equal honesty, explaining that he never expected his dad to rewrite history or sweep Diana's pain under the rug. He just wanted to make sure that history did not dictate how Kate got treated. He wanted his wife protected as a real human being before being put on a pedestal as a symbol. Anne then read the very last lines of that letter. Diana never wanted William's future wife to be a copy of herself. She wanted her to have the freedom, trust, and support that she was denied. Anne's voice cracked a bit, but she read every single word out loud. Charles picked up the crown and handed it right to William, fully agreeing to Kate's rule that Diana's name and true intentions would stay attached to the gesture forever. The future king then placed the crown on his wife's head once more. This time, Kate did not hesitate for a second. She reached out for his hand as the king bowed his head. Anne smiled through tears, while Camilla just stood there in respectful silence. That moment did not erase past heartbreak, it did not defeat the king, and it did not make Kate a replacement for Diana. Instead, it broke the cycle. William honored his mother not by clinging to her pain, but by protecting his wife from ever inheriting it. And Kate accepted that crown not as a status symbol, but as a promise that love, honesty, and empathy would guide the future reign they would one day share. By taking this journey all the way from Diana's private wish to Kate's acceptance, the family turned a decades-old wound into a lasting promise, giving the entire monarchy a real future built on the hard lessons of its past.